Okay, so part of what we're going to do is to prepare the bees for winter. Although bees have been around for millions of years, they know how to do this. And being a beekeeper is really just kind of helping them survive for the winter. That's all it really is. And the better we do that, the better the bees will return the favor by giving us honey, by staying alive, by doing all the things that we want bees to do. So one of the ways we're going to do that is actually manipulating the frames within the hive to ensure a better chance of success. So throughout the year, bees like to move upwards. They just like to go up. And so when we go into winter, we're going to push all of the bees down to the bottom box in the brood chamber, and we'll put the honey in the stores on the top box. Now, leading up to fall or into winter, we're going to switch feeding if you need to feed your bees. We're going to switch feeding from 1 part sugar to 1 part water to 2 part sugar to 1 part water. And this is really a trigger for your bees to start storing that nectar rather than telling the queen there's still plenty of nectar available to lay eggs. So your queen will start slowing down, she'll quit laying eggs. They're going to start storing this thicker syrup in the frames, in the honeycomb. And the other part of the thick syrup is it's less for them to dehydrate. So the bees know that they have to get the syrup down to below 18% so that it is actually honey. They'll store that, they'll cap it, and then they'll keep moving down. So as we go through our beehives, we want to find out, basically do an inventory of all the frames. So my beehives, predominantly 10 frame hives. I've got 2 deep brood boxes. If you've got 3 mediums or whatever the case may be, you really need to go through, do an inventory of your frames so you can quickly manipulate them. The longer we have our beehives open, the more agitated your bees are going to be. And as the days start getting a little cooler, it's just going to be harder for them to warm back up. Now, some of the ways I like to do my inventories in my beehives, just for my own quick reference, some techniques you can use are rather than putting little scratches with my hive tool in the frames, because all of my my frames now are all scratched up because I mark them every which way. I don't want to use a Sharpie or anything permanent because bees change frames for different purposes. So one of the ways I tried to do, this was my very famous Shark Tank moment. I was going to have a frame marking system, so I got all these different colored tacks, colored thumbtacks, red, yellow, blue, white, green, and so I would start marking my frames, and I would have them all here. Well, as it turned out, I kept dumping these out in the bee yard, and they all ended up in the bottom of my shoes, so there's some more work needs to be done before I'm Shark Tank ready here. But there is a good method you can use for marking frames involving just different colored thumbtacks. For example, you know, we're supposed to rotate frames every couple of years, every, let's say, 3 or 4 years. This year for queen marking is green, so 2019 is green marking. Any of my brand new frames this year, I could put a green thumbtack in to remember that it was a 2019 foundation, and so in 3 or 4 years I'll just rotate it out. That worked a lot better for me than writing in Sharpie or ballpoint pen 2019, because then I've got to scratch it out. If you don't want to get all these colored thumbtacks, you can use these little map pens. They're great, they're temporary, they've got a little bump on them. Or for what we're going to do today, to just quickly mark, you can use these little post-its, little tabs here. And for what I'm going to do today, I'm going to use the yellow for any frames that have pollen. I'm going to use green for any frames that have bees, and I'll use blue for any frames that have honey on them. And that way I can arrange those frames quickly based on what's on the frames. So with that, we're going to go and inventory a couple of beehives. We're going to rearrange the frames, and remember, one of the best reasons to have multiple beehives, at least 2, is because you can cross-level and equalize the resources, the pollen, the nectar, and the honey, and the bees between different beehives. Now some say, oh, I shouldn't mix bees because they'll fight and blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about that. It's more important to get resources in your hive so that they'll have a better chance of success. When you move into late fall and you realize there's just not enough bees in this beehive or there's not enough resources in this hive, you should really consider combining those hives, and we'll do that in a separate video. Combining those beehives using a newspaper method, so you'll take 1 weak hive or 2 weeks hive and make one very strong hive. You're going to have success with a stronger hive getting through winter than you will with a weak hive. It's just no sense in risking it. Make a strong hive, get through winter, and then you can split that hive out in the spring. So there's a saying, take your losses in the fall. That means combine weak hives in the fall. You can always break them back out in the spring. With that, we're going to get geared up. I've already got my smoker lit. This time of year, there's a lot of bees at home. They're a little bit more defensive. I won't say aggressive, they're more defensive. So any videos in the past where we've been with no veil and no jacket or anything like that, that's out the window when we get towards fall, because there's a lot of bees at home because it's cooler, and the bees are very defensive because there's not resources coming in. There's no pollen and nectar coming in. Okay, so one of the things that we want to do getting ready for winter is think about pest control and keeping some of the airflow down, the breezes and stuff. Now in this part of the country, in the mid-Atlantic region, probably further south, we don't have winters that are so cold for so long that we need to insulate our hives. So it's personal choice really, but you can get your bees too warm inside, so we don't want that. So we're just gonna not wrap our beehives with any sort of insulation. I'm also going to put an entrance reducer on right in the front. Like so. Getting a little caught on the screen. Also keep it facing down. Some think that you should a typical entrance reducer has a small hole and a larger hole. Some want you to put the larger hole up so that the entrance doesn't get clogged up, or this side up so it doesn't get clogged up. The bees can still drag the dead bees out. Once again, in this region here, the bees aren't going to have such a long cold snap that they can't ever get out to fly. So I think that part is just fine. I also want to put a mouse guard on. Now mouse guard is very important, particularly as we get into days when it's going to start getting into frost, because the mice will definitely get into the beehive and they'll make a nest. You might think, well, why won't the bees defend the hive? And that's a simple reason. It's because once the bees get into winter mode, their job is no longer defense, it's clustering and staying warm. And so the corners of the beehive are going to be relatively safe for a mouse. Of course, depending on where you live, if you've got mice in your hives, you might just find that you'll have snakes in your hive too, and that's just really not something I want to deal with. But this is plenty big enough. If you don't have one of these really nice mouse guards, you can use 1/4 inch hardware cloth. You can get that at Home Depot and stuff. Only problem, you got to get a whole roll of it. So by the time you do that, you could very easily just get you a nice commercial mouse guard. So now we're going to go ahead and start inventorying this beehive, and hopefully there's enough stuff inside. I have a feeling there is, because I do inspections and take good notes. So I just have to rearrange some of the beehives, or some of the frames inside the hive. So as we go in here, there's a bees, you know, they propolis everything, they propolis everywhere. I'm just going to scrape some of this stuff off. Now as always, I look at my frames, count them 1 through 10. My technique from the back, looking from left to right, I see I've got little X's and marks all over from previous methods of marking my frames. Here's a frame that's not even drawn out, so I'll probably keep feeding them for a bit. So I'm going to pull this out. I'm not going to mark this particular frame because it's empty, and there's nothing there for me to mark. So as I go, I'm just going to separate those, slide them out. This is completely full of honey and nectar. So I'm just going to mark it with a little tab. It's going to be blue. So this has a little bit of brood. It also has a little bit of pollen. So the pollen has already been converted to bee bread. And if you look very closely at it, you'll be able to see that it is kind of wet. And so when you see wet pollen, that's what we call bee bread. So this is both pollen and honey. So I'm going to give it 2 stickers. Maybe. Alright, now this is a frame full of brood. Once again, it's got a lot of bees on it. This is what I consider a full frame of bees. So this has got a lot of brood, a lot of eggs in it, and all that is going on here in this frame. This one too. So this is going to get a green sticker. And I want to push this frame to the bottom box. I want to start the winter with my cluster in the bottom. Okay, here's another. I would call this a full frame of bees. You see, this is another brood frame. These are capped brood where the bees are in the pupa stage, and more eggs and larvae here. Now when I'm doing this, if I wanted, I could take a good bit of time and do a thorough inspection, but really all I'm doing right now is inventorying my frames to see what I have. Right now we're getting into pollen. This is all pollen and bee bread, and on the back is capped honey. So it's going to get a blue and a yellow. Now when it's all said and done, we'll push all the bees to the bottom box. And we'll put a frame of pollen to the outside of the bees. Okay, this is all honey. This is why we work with 2 hive tools. One is a lifter, so when the bees kind of glue these together at the bottom, and this is a partially drawn foundation and starting to be honey. I'm not even going to mark it. Alright. So I'm about to upset these girls for a little bit. Now when I'm separating boxes, I just want to set this one on the side like so. I don't want to set it flat down because I don't want to squish bees. I don't want bees to get in the grass. So I'm just going to set it on the side like so. It'll be completely fine. I'm going to continue to inventory. Just going to clean this up a little bit. Now I don't want to just, this is beeswax. It's just beeswax scraps. I don't want to just throw that on the ground because you're going to ask for pests, you know, I mean small hive beetle, wax moth, critters like to eat that stuff, and I don't want it around. So I'm going to start, as always, removing frame number 2. I like to start with either frame 2 or frame 9. This is a combination of both pollen and nectar, and then on the back side is capped honey. Make sure I don't have a queen walking around on there. Let me get that out of the way. Alright, now this is a brood frame. See plenty of eggs in there still, so that's going to be a green marker. I always like seeing eggs, of course. Even if I don't see the queen while we're doing this little inventory, I know she's in there because there's eggs. And eggs are always eggs for 3 days. So she's been in there in the last 3 days. This is all nectar and honey. It's going to be blue. Going through, I always want to make sure I leave a gap. I don't want to drag too many bees out. Just kind of keeps them from getting too upset. One of the things you can always do if you're going to have your hive open for a bit is just cover it. So covering up your hive like that is going to, one, it's going to settle your bees down, it's going to get them a little bit less upset, and it's going to prevent other bees from going over there to rob your hive. So that's just a good way to kind of manage having your bees open for a little bit. Alright, so now what I've got is, besides a bunch of upset bees, I'm going to set that box like so. And I'm going to go through, I want all of my green frames that have honey on them, I mean bees on them, I want those in the bottom box. I want to put my yellow frames with pollen on them to the outside of those. Generally, your queen is not going to be on a frame full of stores, but the key word there is generally. So I want to be very careful not to, drop my queen off into the grass, anything like that. Alright, so if you look here, I've got all of these green tabs here are bees, brood. On the outside of each one of these I have a frame of pollen. And then over here I've got a honey frame, which is just fine. So the bottom box here is set up. It's ready to go. Just going to remove all my little tabs. These really make it easy, ouch, to identify what frames are what. That's a lot of smoke, but the bees are pretty amped up right now. Alright, so now I'm just going to line up all these frames with honey directly over the top of my brood, my bees. Any of the frames that were not completely drawn out, I'm going to put all the way to the outside. Alright, so now I've got honey all over the top of my frames and some pollen and bee bread. All over the top of the bees. We got bees continually stinging me in 2 places. Over and over, they're letting me know they don't like what I'm doing. And I've had the beehives open for some time. Now the final thing I want to do for winter prep is this. I'm going to put my shim here. Now this shim right here will go on top of my beehive. It's just a spacer. It's going to allow me in the winter time to come out here and quickly put some feed, some sugar, some fondant, a block of whatever I need to down here if they're running out of food. There's 2 things I can do now. One is I want to have a vent. I want to have an upper exit for them. So I'll take my inner cover, my notched inner cover, which I normally sit like this on the hive. I want to put it this way. So any moisture can go directly out of this hole and up through the top, and the bees will have a top exit. I like having a top exit in the winter, and I like to have a port for ventilation. And finally, I'll put my quilt box right on top of that. So any moisture that's going to come up, it's going to come up through the hole in the inner cover. It's going to gather in this quilt box and be absorbed. A simple step, if you'd like. Is a 3/8 inch hole right in the center. Like so. That will allow an upper entrance and exit for your bees, a way for a little bit of moisture to get out, and it's going to allow your quilt board to do a little bit of extra work. And that's it. That's what we're going to do for winter. This guy right here will get his cover. it will be done. Now in the winter time, right now I've got a lot of foliage still, but the prevailing wind usually comes this way. So the wind is going to be a bit heavier simply because there's not leaves to block it. So what I'll end up doing is just putting a rock on top of this beehive. If you want to strap it down, that's fine too. But in the winter time, you have a little bit bigger wind simply because there's less leaves to break it up. All of my bottom boards are screened. I'm going to leave the screen bottom boards open, but if I want, I could simply put the tray into the bottom of the screen bottom board. So, key points of prepping for winter are: 1, you want to close up your entrance with a mouse guard and probably reduce the entrance with your entrance reducer. 2, you want to inventory all of your frames. Try and get your bees, your frames full of bees and brood, down into the bottom, into the center of the box. Put frames of pollen to the outside of your brood cluster. And above that, you want to have capped honey. If you don't have capped honey, switch to 2-to-1 sugar to water, 2-part sugar, 1-part water. It doesn't matter if it's by weight or volume. And it doesn't have to be exactly precise. If they don't have pollen stores, feed them a little bit of pollen patty. I usually give them a little bit at a time, maybe like a 2 or 3 inch square at a time. That way it'll prevent small hive beetles from getting laying eggs in that thing, so the bees can eat it up. Line the top up. You need about 60 to 70 pounds of honey, and if you use deep frames, that's going to be about 7 or 8 frames of capped honey. 6 or 7 frames of capped honey with deep frames. If you have mediums, you'll want about 12 frames of honey. We want to make sure that we're doing this, that we're already mite free. You should have your mite treatments done, you've counted your mites, and you're mite free. That way your queen is going to lay healthy winter bees. Your bees are going to go through the winter not worrying about the stresses caused by varroa mite, and you'll be good to go. So if you have any questions about what we've done here, you can send us an email at info@yourbeestore.com. That's one word, yourbeestore.com. You can call us and ask us questions, and that's it. All right, good luck. 25 more to do.